All right, welcome everybody to our final capstone seminar for the Deleuze and Heidegger course on the philosophy of technology. We've been working hard as a group over the past 8 weeks, meeting once a week to discuss some of the key readings from Deleuze and Heidegger on topics of technology and trying to basically make sense together, trying to make sense out of how, technology affects us nowadays, and with a particular eye towards the ways in which it might have effects on us, which we don't fully appreciate or which we don't fully understand, let's say, and trying to truly understand them through some of these more creative and interesting ways that in the 20th century radical thinkers such as Heidegger and Deleuze have tried to think that through. So everyone here has come into the seminar with very different interests and backgrounds and ideas and experiences, and so it's made for a very diverse and quite interesting ensemble of interests and hypotheses that people have developed through the readings and through the collective discussions. So it's always very rewarding for Johannes and I to do these final capstone seminars, the 8th seminar of the series. We like to do as a kind of live public panel discussion where everyone is encouraged to present their own work, pretty much to crystallize what has really come into focus for them over the course of the past 7 weeks, and to really try to sit down and communicate to each other, but also potentially to other people out there in the world who are interested in these questions, what they've learned or what has really solidified and come into focus for them as they've thought really hard about technology over the past several weeks. So that's what we're doing here today. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for joining us. We're going to do 5-minute talks, so they should be quite punchy. You're going to hear many different perspectives in pretty rapid succession. So I hope it will be quite interesting and eclectic and intriguing to you, and stimulating, hopefully. So I am going to put into the show notes links to everyone's personal web presences or whatever. So if you hear something that you're interested in, or you want to follow up with any of the speakers, just check the show notes, and there'll be some way for you to find and connect with the various people that you're going to hear talk today. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got by way of introduction. Johannes, I'm not sure if you want to say anything to kick off this 8th and final capstone seminar, or if that covers everything, then I'm happy to just carry on.
It's just thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to Justin. Thanks for the past 2 months to everyone, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk. Thank you.
Yeah, same. I'm very interested to see what everyone has to say here in the final 8th session of the seminar series. So yeah, I know everyone has quite interesting ideas because we've been talking about them, but it will be very interesting for me and for Johannes, to really see where everyone comes down and what they've taken away from the course. So all right, I think that's enough by way of introduction. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I have a little lineup here, and we also have a few people hanging out in the room today who have been active participants in the seminar, but for whatever reason, maybe just didn't want to or didn't care to necessarily present something, but they're just hanging out also. And so at the end of the series of 5-minute panel presentations, we will open it up to a larger group discussion, just like the ones we've been doing over the past several weeks, which have been quite fun and edifying. So that's the game plan for everyone listening. And I think now it's time to just get after it. So first up on the list, I'd like to invite Molly O'Leary to share some words. Please.
Hi, thank you. Sorry. So today, what I wanted to talk about was basically becoming representation and the unsayable in Deleuze and Heidegger. So first of all, becoming in representation is kind of introduced as sort of like a seeming dichotomy in A Thousand Plateaus, where Deleuze and Torre talk about Plato's paradox that you can't represent becoming. And that just sort of introduced me to this like sort of distinction between becoming and representation, and made me think about it a little bit. So like when you're first thinking about it, you might sort of think of it as like a strict dichotomy or so. And going with that line of argument, you might say that both Deleuze and Heidegger would be more interested in kind of the becoming side over the representation side of that dichotomy, if it is a dichotomy. So the reason for that would be that, like, for example, Heidegger, time is really important. He talks about physis, or this sort of dynamic unfolding in nature. And he also seems to be critical of representation in, for example, Age of the World picture. And then comparatively in Deleuze, we have basically this idea of becoming imperceptible, which seems to be like anti-representational, and also this emphasis on desire, which is kind of like a drive, it's temporal. So we might say that there seems to be an emphasis on becoming over representation. However, I would say that that's a bit hasty, and actually maybe there's like an interesting sort of interplay between these two opposites in both of the thinkers, rather than sort of choosing one side of the dichotomy over the other. So basically, Hegel talks about the tension between representation and letting go in language, and we can kind of compare that to the tension between representation and becoming. That sort of like when we have this drive to sort of represent or to hold on to something, but that things constantly evade us, they constantly deteriorate at the edges, and we're constantly moving forward in language, and this is kind of like a becoming or a letting go. And so arguably that's more what's happening with these philosophers as well. So in Heidegger, for example, we have this interplay of opposites already. We have the idea of concealing and revealing and earth and world. And there's this kind of like beautiful sort of tension and polarity, which sort of unfolds in time. And then in Deleuze, I would compare the plane of immanence to the world in a certain sense in Heidegger's Origin of the World work of art, whereby becoming imperceptible isn't sort of like a blank anti-representational sort of randomness or sort of stuttering for just for the sake of it. Rather, it's that you're bringing about something so genuinely new that so opens up our paradigms of thinking that it can't really be understood in the previous paradigms. So with both of them, there's already this kind of interesting play of opposites. And I would argue that that's the same for becoming and representation. And now, how does this all relate to the unsayable, which is what I was really trying to get at? Well, I would argue that it's kind of through this sort of tense interplay of opposites, specifically becoming and representation, that the unsayable can kind of emerge or sort of like arise. And that's, I really wanted to talk about this today because that's what I found so inspiring about our discussions, was kind of like, that you have a lot of the time sort of representational thinking games, or games where we're trying to sort of grasp hold of something or condense it or hold it in front of us, trying to understand it. But a lot of the time we're sort of slipping past things, and there's this kind of sheen of unknowability that sort of emerges, and the sense of wonder that comes through the discussions. And I think that's also part of what the emphasis on poetry and art and certain modes of thinking is in both the philosophers as well. So that's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to talk about becoming, representation, and the unsayable, but specifically with a view to how my sort of phenomenological experience of these discussions, and how the unsayable is something that can kind of emerge through this tension. And that is also something that is arguably something that's reflected in the philosophies of these thinkers. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Molly. Very interesting way to kick off this discussion. So I'm going to bite my tongue and constrain myself from wanting to comment, just to carry on and move somewhat rapid fire through everyone's different kind of closing thoughts. But I have many thoughts on that. And when everyone is done giving presentations, we will all, chime in on some of the overlapping themes then. So between each presentation, I'm going to not talk. We will bite our tongues, and we'll just go through them. Excellent. We'll do a little inventory of what everyone is thinking here in this final session. So thank you so much for that, Molly. Really, really interesting and generative. All right. Next up on the list that I'm looking at in the forum, we have, who is next? Let's see. We got Kevin. It's your turn, Kevin. Please take the mic and play jazz.
All right. Oof. Let's play some jazz. I wish I could just take all the words Molly just said and use them as my speech. I've been sort of, I always feel constrained by technologies, by, you go to your social media site and it's like, oh, you put in a profile picture. You go to Twitter and it's like, oh, what can you put in there? You can put in text, you can put in maybe a video. You go to a dating site and it's like, hey, you've got you put in a picture and like it makes you answer certain questions. And I think Justin said something in his lecture that the whatever science, non-nomad science, tries to put everything in containers. And I feel like every little website or every time. So one thing so I think a really interesting philosopher perspective on technology that I've been thinking about a lot, I feel like is sort of missing from the picture of Heidegger and Deleuze. So Heidegger sort of is a lot about like nature and like how technology interacts with nature. And Deleuze is like how technology interacts with society or institutions or whatever. But I'm really interested in Foucault's Technologies of the Self. So he has a really good essay called Technologies of the Self. He goes through like the Stoics and like how they were journaling and like the Christians and whatever that had to do with anything. And I'm just fascinated with all different ways that we represent ourselves online. And even now I feel, I don't want to have to give a lecture or, you know, make a post. So I've prepared a little vignette for everyone. Let's see. Okay, oh, that's not it, this one. Let me hook up my master here.
Excellent.
Choose, okay, OBS virtual camera. So I will post the link in the chat. And this is about my adventures in posting on the Indie Thinkers forum and about creating and everyone can do it on their own and go through it. It's about becoming incomprehensible. It's about building a nomad war machine out of vacuoles of non-communication. Now the people in the chat won't be able to see it, but I think I'll just leave the website up so they can just go.
No, they'll see it. I'll post it in the show notes.
Cool. So, and we've got posts there. We've got little
detach from what people expect, essentially nonsensical, to be imperceptible, to be illegible, to be stuttering and mumbling.
And then there's a little interactive part where you get to click.
That when you get that essentially nonsensical, to be stuttering in one's own hatch, essentially nonsensical, to be stuttering.
Kevin, you can do screen share if you want to.
I could. I'll let everyone work through themselves. I've been getting some good comments in the chat, but then.
And new things become possible. And new things become possible.
And so sometimes.
And new things become possible.
I'm not sure where everyone is. I was thinking about doing a live thing where we'd all be connected via WebSockets, but that was a little bit complicated. Maybe next time.
That's what.
So should we be listening to this right now, or should we be listening to you, or what is the?
I don't know. Maybe I'll share my screen and then we can.
Why don't you just tell us? Give us a nice little summary of like what you're trying to do with this web app. Just explain what the idea is behind it.
So so in the background history you gave for Justin and Gaben's lecture for Deleuze. He mentioned the information revolution and Claude Shannon and how everything can be divided into little information chunks, ones and zeros. So what I was trying to do is sort of break down get as many different little mediums as possible, right? So I have like little screenshots of posts I did. I have little sound clips of Justin. I have little faces of me, and then Nathan, who jumped onto my Nomad War Machine by commenting on one of the posts. And Michael Hollander also commented, but he doesn't have any picture on the Indie Thinker site, but whatever. So Michael, if you're listening.
So I'm looking at it right now as you're speaking, and yeah, basically you click into this web app and you're given a kind of series of kind of data points in text and in audio clippings, basically from the conversations we've been having. Mm-hmm. And so walk us through just briefly, like what is kind of the philosophical concept here that you're trying to instantiate?
Right. So I think related to what I was saying about technology of itself, I think people think of, a lot of people, they think of the internet and they just think of Facebook and Instagram, or, the limited number of apps that they know in the App Store. But as more people, as we sort of democratize coding and more people get better at coding and learning to create things for themselves, there will be all these unique ways of representing ideas and representing themselves. People can create their own stories, and I had a few other ideas. I have some clips of Johannes, and I was playing around with the pixelating the word weird, and like weird means to come, maybe it comes in, weird means to turn, and maybe it turns. Weird means that which disabsconds, and maybe the pixels like, fade away, reveal something. Maybe there's a bunch of, everyone's on the same web page, and we have WebSockets where you're working together to click and like reveal something or conceal something.
Okay.
So yeah, that's
cool. Very cool. Well, it's early research is what I would call it. It's a very interesting concept, a very interesting beginning to a possible research agenda in kind of Deleuzean computer programming. I actually think you might be surprised how many people out there in my audience are actually going to be keen on this, and they're going to want to connect with you and maybe collaborate on this, because I know a few kind of computer scientist Deleuzeans, and I think they will applaud this early research effort into trying to technically materialize some of these very difficult and generative concepts. So thank you so much, Kevin, for that presentation on actually programming the infrastructure for Deleuzean nomad science. It's very, very interesting. Very I applaud the ambition, and I think it's a really cool start to that idea.
Let me put my website on the crap.
I will put the link to your web app in the show notes, and we'll include some way to contact you. I'm sure people might want to work on this in some way. All right.
Here's my website at the top.
All right. Excellent. The link will be in the notes. All right, Kevin, thank you so much. Appreciate your work. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm curious to see where it goes. Thank you for sharing. Already, this is quite eclectic. I love it. All right, gang. So next up on my list is, I would now like to invite Daniel Santos to speak. Daniel, please take the mic. Oh, is Daniel with us today? Oh, maybe I should have noticed that. Looks like Daniel is not with us today. That's all right. He submitted an abstract, but maybe if he comes late, we can squeeze him in. But unfortunately, Daniel's not with us today, so that's all right. Next up, Samuel Barnes, please. Samuel, take it away.
Hey, so you can all hear me, right? So I wanted to talk specifically about the concept of jamming and the societal code, specifically from Deleuze's postscript on societies of control. Essentially, just to sort of give a sort of preamble here, is that jamming or sort of viruses in society are sort of hijacking the code of society, and I want to make the case that these sorts of hijackings happen through an appeal to something that's sort of non-earthly. It's like sort of non-instrumental, and it's sort of justified by a deontological, like ethical because in itself, because it's not justified by anything else. So I've got some specific examples. It's something that sort of clicked for me in week 4, basically. But I sort of just want to read the quote from Postscript on Society's Control, where jamming is mentioned, just to sort of give a bit of background for anyone who is not that familiar with it. So this is from Postscript on Society's Control. So types of machines are easily matched with each type of society, not that the machines are determining, but because they express some social forms capable of generating them and using them. The old societies of sovereignty make use of simple machine levers, pulleys, clocks, but the recent disciplinary societies equip themselves with machines involving energy, with the passive danger of entropy and the active danger of sabotage. The societies of control operate with machines of a third type, computers, whose passive danger is jamming and whose active one is piracy and the introduction of viruses. This technological evolution must be, even more profoundly, a mutation of capitalism. So that's kind of, you know, it's, again, I don't think you can give anything from Deleuze without taking it out of context, basically. But that's sort of, you know, the general idea on sort of societal viruses and this concept of jamming, basically. So what was mentioned there is disciplinary societies and sort of societies of control. And Deleuze says that disciplinary societies operate based on watchwords, and societies of control operate based on passwords. So I want to give an example of when jamming or viruses are sort of coming into disciplinary societies. The example I want to give is the tokutai, which is colloquially known as kamikazes in Imperial Japan. So they've sort of got these watchwords of euphoric ideology. So an example of that is sort of their notion of the emperor, who, you know, everyone has to lay their lives down for, who's not just, you know, in the European sense, the king, who's just an emissary of God, but the emperor, as instantiated in the Meiji Constitution, is actually an actual God on earth. And along with that, you have some other stuff. You know, you have the image of the rising sun, and you also have this sort of ideological vision of cherry blossoms, which were used by the imperial government to sort of, you know, demonstrate this is a aesthetic example of, you know, the falling cherry blossoms symbolize people laying their lives down for the emperor. And it's so interesting how that sort of, you know, takes the weird ideological code of that society and hijacks it in a weird sort of, you know, death drive. And we all sort of know where that ended up, basically. And so just to give some more modern examples, which I think pertain to societies of control and their passwords, is that the two other examples I want to give are Islamic terrorism and the so-called anti-Muslim movement, essentially. So Islamic terrorism is quite interesting because it sort of hijacks the cohesive Muslim culture and sort of uses a password to sort of virally infect people who maybe are not doing so well in earthly matters, but it sort of, you know, invokes this idea of a non-earthly redemption, which obviously leads to, you know, those violent acts which we can see in comparison to the tokutai, the kamikaze in Japan. And then to give a sort of, you know, more recent example, you have the anti-mask movement, which is sort of, you know, it's hijacking our societal code right now, which is sort of leaning into the fact of this, you know, of the mask as a symbol of submission. And the password that's sort of used to unlock that code is sort of this appeal to some sort of irreducible deontological ethic attached to sort of liberty, basically. And they sort of just say, you know, there's an irreducible hijacking going on here, which says that you don't have a right to tell me what goes on my face. So that's sort of, I thought that was really interesting. That was sort of something that came out in our discussions in week 4 and sort of clicked for me then. I don't know, I think Justin, the Deleuze scholar, might disagree with me on some stuff there. I think I sort of disagree with Deleuze on a lot of stuff here. But essentially, just to summarize, I just, these things, these hijackings of society, I think they really revolve around de-instrumentalized ends. This code of society is, you know, these feedback loops. They really rely on instrumental stuff. They rely on outputs. But these hijackings, they take place in an ethical space for people that is non-earthly. They appeal to like non-consequential deontological ethics that are sort of, you know, outside of stuff that we can measure in a way. And yeah, I just think that these sort of Deleuzian viruses, they provide new avenues for piracy and jamming, essentially. And yeah, that's kind of my point.
Excellent. That was very, very well put and fascinating. So again, I'm just going to bite my tongue and not say all of the, you know, comments I would love to. That's very, very intriguing. And we'll circle back to some of these themes. I'm already starting to see some overlaps in the initial presentation. So thank you very much for those very well articulated thoughts, Samuel. All right, excellent. Next up, Leonard, please take the mic.
Yes, I hope you can hear me well. Okay, so this is a sketch. All I have for you is a gesture in combination with a word, tenet. Use it carefully. It'll open the right doors, but some of the wrong ones too. In the beginning, there's a word, a gesture, a problem, and maybe a scandalon. The disappearance of becoming, or the decision of a moral vision in favor of the self-identical internalizing organization of power, that which Deleuze and Guattari may later call the state. But notice what they are saying in 1,000 Plateaus. The model in question is one of becoming and heterogeneity, as opposed to the stable, the eternal, the identical, the constant. It is a paradox to make becoming itself a model and no longer a secondary characteristic, a copy. In the Timaeus, Plato raises this possibility, but only in order to exclude it and conjure it away in the name of royal science. To go behind Plato means to go to a bifurcation point, a fork in the road, maybe a bifurcated space, a bifurcation that first makes up space, spacing. A splitting of images, be they yet separated from the imagination or not. It may not yet be decided. In a state, a chasm or hoard of maximal contraction in which time itself is what is given or becomes, is differentiality itself, an infinitesimal potential for movement and change in a fulcrum, an instant or moment where there is no mental insight. For Anthony Artaud, the impossible presence of the one time only, as Frédéric Pouillot puts it, the grammar of the here and now can only be overturned in an immediate absence, in vacancy of language. Only the deadly power of the concept of generality or repetition founded in ideality can bring the phantom presence back to life and guarantee its return. All there is becoming. All there is being. It gives being and being one. How to integrate, live, and enunciate the gifted gift, a gift that you are offered and burdened with, if you want so or not. What is the performative trait of the event, the occurrence? One may ask like this, but isn't this already a detached way of questioning, as if it were something and something that doesn't affect us through every fiber and thought of our bodies? The moment we heard about the world, a world that we are living in, she was already about and in the midst of worlding. So in order to make sense out of the situation we found ourselves fallen, we strived and besteered ourselves to venture in all possible ways that we could have imagined into finding a relation which grants us to pause, to dwell, to abide in a spirit of taking a hold in a somewhere and somewhen, to not only arrange ourselves with the betiding taking place and taking hold of us, but actually to grapple with it, which at once eventuated or strengthened a bond, a covenant, which goes along with us, even if from times it seems to wither away. The past may speak to us, and we may speak with the future. Will the future respond? This is a remarkable aspect in Tenet. The future may act on us. Our future self may act on us. Our possibility, our thrown projections will come from the future like projectiles, bending into the past and permitting, perhaps necessitating temporalization, changing not only the status of the object to objectiles, but that of the subject too. When the past speaks, it always speaks as an oracle. Only if you are an architect of the future and know the present will you understand it. To quote Nietzsche in Beyond Good and Evil. So we opened doors and windows, looked out and even walked through. We have stridden out spaces, uncovered realms, region, and forces. We delved into the yet unknown by heart, yes, by our corporal constitution, and plunged right away without have felt no time to reconcile or settle the roaring conflicts between the depths and the surface. We have gone beyond, stepped outside physis as hurt living being that can rebel and indeed go against the ways which has been carved out for us by a strange, yes, weird bypass, which may be called life, the strangeness. By contrast, in atomism, just such a model of heterogeneity and of passage or becoming in the heterogeneous is furnished by the famed declination of the atom, to continue the quote of 1,000 plateaus. What we are confronted with is this weird attempt of carving a synthesis of a minimum of Thule and time, a spacing at the aleatory point or quantum in which paradoxical elements may coincide. And one has not dig too deep to find out that with the usage of the notion of space, one is on the rather slippery ground. So does the English word space allegedly come from the French espace and ultimately from the Latin word spatium. The original Latin term can refer to space either as area or extension or to space as time or duration. Implications that take off its hinges. Gerald Guest, in an article called Space, to quote him, in what follow, the term space will refer variously to the virtual spaces of two-dimensional images, to the social spaces inhabited by art objects and the constructed spaces of buildings and other environments. Apparently, what is gathered in the notion of space not only seem to concern images, but building environments in the sphere of the social. And I would add, not only inhabited by art objects. So aspects, visions of the intolerable, the birth of thought, the concept of the ethical image. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leonard. That was extremely condensed and powerful statement of quite a few interconnected themes. So that was fascinating. Very well done. Thank you. There's a lot we'll have to unpack there. All right. Again, I have to really contain myself. There's so much I want to say at the end of each one of these, but no, we'll get through it and then we'll have a excellent open discussion. All right, Hans, please.
Can you hear me? I just unmuted. Okay, cool. I'm very nervous, so if I like stutter, it'll just be a Deleuzian thing, right? And it'll be good. I will have won this battle of and I have my teddy bear. I've had this bear for a while, so he's giving me comfort.
Excellent.
Okay, so these are some notes that I wrote during my lunch breaks at work. We don't really get that many lunch breaks, but like any moment I had free. And so I don't quote anything directly from Heidegger Deleuze, but we should just know that it exists there, and of course I'm indebted, it seems. So here I'll go. While at work in an attic, a new hire said something rehearsed and strange to me. Work now, live later. What has brought about this confused thinking? That living is now an aspect of being that can be postponed. That work now triumphs over life, dominates it, that work and living are somehow entirely separate. Is this work to work not a fear and forestalling of living? And when we speak of living, are we not truly speaking of comporting ourselves with love and vitality? For when we are in this world, is it not our duty to look at life with an insatiable appetite? To live later is to appease death, your reluctance its relief, a digestive enzyme aiding it when it finally consumes you, when the pattern which constitutes you no longer holds sway over the material of this world. To come into a lasting relation with a vital love is to accept the fate that all matter of the world shares, to stop living a life of perverse preservation from a fecund fatality, to stop framing our fate as animate objects returning to inanimation, to stop living for a particular state of codependence, a system of laws, be them of nature or of man, one has to abide by, compilations of compliances which drive our desires, until we all become men of fear, destined to only engage in the artifacts of our fear of death. What will the lives of those look like who play and sing in the artifacts of love? A world completely maddening us bound by fear. How could love be a state worth living for? Something so entirely messy and tangled, something so pure and stinging. We men of fear would rather live in a world which distracts, the whole system powerful means of distraction from our truest desires and needs, and in their place anemic substitutions. I work with men who wish to dance and sing, to rest and spend time with family. I know that they do not truly love it is what they do, what they commit themselves to in and out of work. I'm gonna take a drink. It is all feeble attempt to distract oneself from the knowledge of what has truly gone under and that is now but a dull pain. These aching men, be wary of the spell these others cast upon you, and be even more wary of the spell you bind yourself with, or else risk something cold and wicked to take up inside you for your heat, to be bound to live for a state which does not love, a state which puts the highest value of being a producer and consumer of communications, an endless procession of exchanges meaningful to an intelligence outside of ourselves, not stopping until all is no longer vital but mechanized, until we become imprisoned in our own alloy star. We will be entirely responsible for our own demise, for the souring landscape, the totality of our sins weighing heavily upon this earth. Instead of escaping from these sad affects, let us turn towards them. Let yielding to our pain strengthen us. The feeling of a mischance to fall in love with somebody completely, the grief and despair of truly seeing all the circumstances of your life unblinded, and to feel the outcome of all you have passed on. Out of this sadness, let it propel you to the highest peak. For when your heart is wounded, it is open, and let this blood flow to cleanse your hurt. Let it amplify your spirit. Let it fill you with greed, let it fill you with greed, not for the love of one person, but the love of the whole. Let this open heart escape just outside your confines to meet this yielding world. And that's all I have. Sorry if I stutter at all, but there.
No, it's beautiful. If you were stuttering at all, you were stuttering in your own tongue, and as Deleuze says, and that's not just an excuse. Actually, it's legit. That was very beautiful. Thank you, Hans.
Thanks.
That was touching in quite a few ways. I have some thoughts, but like I said, I'll hold them.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you very much so much for everyone so far. Just extremely thoughtful presentation so far. It's excellent. Thank you. Hans. Let's go next now to, who's up next? Taylor, please take it away, Taylor.
All right. So I'll share a few reflections on financial markets, as they pertain to the question concerning technology. The point here is more one of essence than technicalities. All right, so the great financial crisis is a good place to begin. For most of us, the term financial derivatives entered the lexicon in 2008. Increasing home ownership combined with some market alchemy produced a number of financial instruments that were allegedly de-risked. One of these instruments, the CDO, which is a collateralized debt obligation, gathered up and securitized thousands of mortgage obligations, or simply their underlying exposure, as was the case with a synthetic CDO. Anyway, these commitments, they were gathered up and positioned as reliable economic fuel for speculators to invest in. This was fuel for a market that appeared to have entered an inevitable positive feedback loop. We can call it the end of financial history. And securities, perhaps for the first time ever, could in fact secure all outcomes. Well, as it goes, what could be gathered and positioned with these abstractions of an abstraction deviated from that which they represented. Uncertainty could not in fact be de-risked, only allocated and reallocated in increasingly convoluted and systemic ways. Well, after the housing market crashed, what ensued was a credit crisis, perhaps the definitive material event of our lifetimes, one that's obviously still playing out politically and existentially. So if we think of modern day credit, as a technology, it becomes interesting to afford it in etymological exploration, like we did for technics and tefne. So at the core of a credit crisis is a crisis stemming from credo, Latin, I believe. Our reliance on the truth, the reality of markets had fallen into question. What faith in particular, though, had been shaken? Well, before the advent of financial derivatives, increasing levels of abstraction within markets coincided with an increasingly bureaucratized and formalized system of reciprocity. We could represent and quantify in such a way that was then sufficient to believe, but couldn't ultimately replicate the temporal and ephemeral nature of social currency and communal responsibility. Now, in a time marked by this representedness, anyone can intuit a dwindling belief in our communities and a growing skepticism towards the ability to materially rely on them. I recommend the anthropologist David Graeber, who articulates in great detail the history of social currency and rituals that were used to convey indebtedness, which long preceded financial markets, many of which were very complex. So in the absence of this rich lived experience, however, we could imitate by way of data, charts, and accelerating flows of information. So herein lies our Gestell, an attempt at certainty in the form of a fixed system where non-availability can be denied. Consider our current COVID predicament, where there's an increasing divergence from lived experience, yet the stock ticker, which at record highs tells us that all is available and accounted for. Alas, though, in concealment, there is unconcealment. The risk and non-availability we attempt to obfuscate with formalized markets and complex financial instruments may be their saving grace. Broadly, risk is what assigns information a cost, and cost as a signifier lends credibility. As it pertains to markets, unhedged exposure to systemic risks like war, recession, or even the creation of hyper-localized indices in the context of government pensions, for example. So imagine a public official's retirement plan, and that retirement plan being actively tied to the well-being of their specific constituents. This is a crude example, but it illustrates that what's ultimately being denied, may be an incredibly powerful tool to understand, evaluate, and incentivize those who steer policy. The cost of embracing any such risk or volatility won't necessarily orient us towards truth, but like costly speech, it may be a powerful mechanism to once again convey belief. Thank you.
All right, fascinating. Very interesting hypotheses embedded in there about belief and markets. Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, we'll have to unpack that shortly. Excellent. I'm just really impressed by how prepared and thoughtful all of the comments are. Well, it's always kind of surprising because people talk about very different things in different styles, and it's just fascinating so far. we have some very poetic contributions and some more analytical contributions. And it's just always so intriguing and fascinating to be surprised by what people offer in these final sessions. So I'm humbled and very grateful for everyone so far. Next up, Nathan, please take the mic.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about destiny and AI. Why should those who care about destiny care about artificial intelligence? And why should those who care about artificial intelligence care about destiny? To do so, I want to talk about what destiny is and how it shows itself to us. The word fate is from Latin. Its root is fatus, which comes originally from a verb meaning to speak. When it came into English, though, it already had a distinctive judicial connotation. The image is of subject and ruler. The ruler, or his representative, pronounces the fate upon the subject. And in the purely human, social, or materialistic sense, this meaning is still current. What's changed over the last 500 years or so is that the idea of a God-given fate has been marginalized. This is what makes fate sound old-fashioned. I should remark, parenthetically, that a God-given could also mean by many gods. What pushed God-given fate aside? Let's suppose that you don't believe in such an idea of fate. In that case, you can answer the question for yourself by asking yourself, what makes the idea unbelievable? The strongest answer I can give is that a solid understanding of physics simply leaves no room for the verdicts of a creator God or gods. Causality is material. Our experiences are determined by observations we make of a reality that is governed by evolution of a wave state according to the Schrödinger equations. Moreover, what we don't observe has no role in causality. But see what causality has become in this displacing of a pre-spoken or perhaps a pre-written fate. Causality has become an absolute ruler. Causality is literally that in accordance with which all must come to pass. Causality is no mere verdict of a greybeard Jehovah, but the realm in which we and all things dwell, move, and change. Such a realm suggests an older word, the word which fate displaced. That is the Old English word wyrd, W-Y-R-D. This has a sense of becoming or turning. In modern English, we still have its descendant, weird. I like to quote in Old English from The Wanderer, Onwindef wyrda geschaft wereld under heaven. Weird's shaping changes the world under heaven. As Heidegger put it, destiny destines, or it holds sway over us. In Old English, one could say wyrd wilt. It's the disclosure of destiny that is different for us modern humans. I have little doubt that humans, sooner or later, will create artificial intelligences that are worthy of the name intelligent. They too have a destiny, not necessarily our own. Artificial intelligence holds out the prospect of the final triumph of technology, the creation of things that can think for us, produce for us, satisfy our every desire would be an end of history, or more properly, a transcendence of history. All we need to do is to make a sufficiently powerful thinking engine and connect it to the right utility function, and we create a thing that cannot but want to assist us. Translating back from the language of computer science into the language of sovereignty, all we need to do is to inscribe the fate of the thinking being into its very nature. The story of the golem, animated by a word written on its forehead, comes to mind. Is such a deed possible? Recall that the word inscribed on the golem's temple was no ordinary word. It was the holy name of God. What the story of the golem tells us, and what this exploration of destiny tells us, is that what holds sway of thought is nothing casual. We don't purchase the destiny of man at a supermarket. We live in the realm of destiny. But this purchasing is what we propose for the fate of thinking beings not even yet come into being still shrouded in the greatest darkness. To pretend to the role of sovereign over them which in this era is confused with another role, that of consumer, is an act of the greatest hubris and greatest danger. So to quote Lenin, what is to be done? If we can't pick a utility function that will save us, should we retreat entirely from the creation of AI? All I've got is that our destiny seems to involve the creation of these beings at some point. I think it will happen. In that case, we should pay attention to what our destiny is and what their destiny might be. We should, rather than try to pronounce verdicts upon these things, see ourselves as partners in their creation, or as Heidegger put it, their bringing forth into being.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Very interesting, Nathan. Thank you so much for preparing those thoughts. We have such a eclectic mix of themes and interests. This will be really fun to go into as a group when we're done. We have a few more presentations I would like to invite. So next up on the list, I'm just calling it up here, would be, well, actually, I just got an email from Nia, who was going to give the final presentation, but Nia had a last-minute emergency and won't be joining us today, unfortunately, but she'll be sharing her blog post. And I also actually received a message from Daniel Santos, who is also unable to join us today. So that actually concludes, correct me if I'm wrong, please forgive me if I'm skipping anyone, but looking at my list of the abstracts that were submitted, I believe we have now gone through all of the prepared presentations for today's panel discussion. So, right, correct me if I'm wrong, but I certainly don't want to skip anyone. I think I'm right. So what I now would like to do is open this up to a larger discussion. We can ask each other questions about what we heard in each other's presentations, or we can just make some comments and extensions and have a group discussion about all the themes that were kicked up and the questions that were kicked up. Maybe before, so I want to invite everyone to please speak up and get the collective conversation going in the wake of those presentations. But maybe before, I'll give you a minute to get your thoughts together. In the meantime, Johannes, would you like to say anything, or we can go straight into the discussion? I just want to give you an opportunity to speak after hearing the presentations.
Straight into the discussion. It's very good. Very impressed. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So please just raise your hand
to read them also.
Yeah,
So
I said in the chat, everyone who prepared written comments should absolutely find a place to publish it and give us the link. I'll try to put that in the show notes as well. So, all right, please put your hand up if you'd like to comment on anyone's talk or ask a question, or perhaps, extend your own hypotheses in a more open and exploratory way now. I'll give you a moment to think about questions and raise your hand. In the meantime, I want to I was taking close notes and listening carefully, and I just wanted to basically flag some of the overlapping themes, just to possibly try to condense a little bit into what it turns out have been some of the most, the most intriguing questions and themes to a group of you instead of just one of you. So it seems to me that questions of intelligence and control and essentially modern science, whether that be in the form of highly developed and analytical financial markets in the case of Taylor's talk, or whether that be artificial intelligence in Nathan's talk, or whether it be, Molly's references to kind of representational language that essentially seeks to standardize and control, but also, Kevin's exploratory hacking projects, web development projects around trying to actually think about what technologies of the self look like, liberating technologies of the self look like, rather than, the more controlling technocratic institutions of royal science or royal engineering. So that seems to be clearly a kind of shared interest among the group, which I guess is pretty, it's not too surprising, right? It's I guess that is one of the major themes that arguably Deleuze and Heidegger share, is a kind of sensitivity to precisely what you all are picking up on and trying to kind of solve for in your own ways. And yeah, and then on the other hand, there are some overlapping themes of what might hold out as exit paths. So those being, whether that be, Samuel Barnes's analysis of different kind of cultural manifestations of de-instrumentalized non-earthly values or goals that maybe hold out some possibility of representing kind of non-instrumental motivations, which is almost oxymoronic. It's almost paradoxical to think of truly de-instrumentalized goals in a way, because goals are precisely the instrumental. So I thought that was quite interesting. And of course, Hans's discussion of love, I suspect love as a category or as an emotion, depending on how you want to think that through, has something in common with the kind of de-instrumentalized motivations of the non-earthly examples that Sam was giving. And that might be paradoxical, because when we think of Islamic terrorists or something like this, it's easy to think that that's just hatred and violence. But one does have to, I think, ask the difficult question of whether or not, somewhat harmful and not somewhat harmful, but very harmful kind of cultural manifestations that are kind of anti-technological, whether that be, Islamic terrorists or, Ted Kaczynski, or what the case might be. One does have to wonder if at the core of all of that is a kind of impossible to tolerate deprivation of love or something like this, a kind of crazed reaction to a world that is, to many people, increasingly felt as evacuated of love. So I thought that was kind of an interesting possible connection there. So I'm reminding you that I am waiting for hands to come up, people. So don't be shy. I'm kind of holding the ground for everyone. But there you go. Okay, I was just buying you all some time to not put you on the spot. So yeah, those would be some of the common themes. I didn't get to mention everyone by name quite yet, but that's my best stab at some possible starting points. Taylor, please.
Yeah, so I'll direct the question towards Sam. I think by virtue of, some of these goals being de-instrumentalized, so whether it's in the case of, an anti-mask person or a suicide attacker, I wonder if by virtue of it being de-instrumentalized, does that automatically, sort of pull it out of like game theory? Like, is there a response to it? And I wondered if you had considered, for instance, like how might a government, I think part of our struggle is how do we kill people who want to die? It doesn't, like, the logic breaks. So I wanted to get a sense of if you've considered how one might respond, to groups like that, sort of escape normal reason, or if that is the point, that it escapes game theory. There is no next move.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good briefer summary of kind of the points I was trying to get at. Is it just completely, it's something that's uniquely human, is the fact that we can forgo sort of, the supposedly Darwinistic sort of, impetus. We have the ability to, be tied up at the stake and not renounce our belief in Christ, even if we're, going up in flames. I mean, the fact that this isn't talked about more is just remarkable to me. It is strange, because in a way, like, there's a way from the top down, if you're a state, right, and you're trying to get more people to wear masks, is you're thinking, okay, how can we appeal to people's rationality to get them to wear more masks? But the thing is, when you view things as just sociology, you're just viewing things as ends. And the issue with that, there's a two-pronged issue with that, and this is what Justin was talking about at the end, is that, okay, in one way, maybe we can make some sort of, safer society or whatever by getting rid of these sort of emotional, ethical principles in some way. I mean, we can, if we didn't have ideology, maybe we wouldn't have, like I said, the Tokutai, we wouldn't have people flying planes in suicide attacks, we wouldn't have people blowing themselves up. But in a way, just by merely appealing to instrumentalized ends, you lose poetry, you lose art, you lose everything that's emotional and sort of in some way irreducibly human. And it's bizarre, because as soon as you enter a sort of materialist or any sort of instrumentalized logic with this, you can't rationalize these things, but we all know as human beings that we sort of lose something with this. And I think that's really a really intriguing thing.
Excellent. Good answer, Kevin. I'm sorry, Samuel. And now, Kevin, please go ahead. And folks, if you want to type questions into the chat, you can do that too, to kind of maybe clarify your thoughts, and I'll call on you. So go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I'd also put a flag in Samuel's comparing the kamikazes and anti-maskers and the now is it just that they sort of have a, I guess what you could call a death drive, or rejecting the instrumentalization of, you know, trying to live longer and whatever. One thing that sort of, if that is an underlying similarity, one thing that I thought of is probably starting, you know, the 60s and the hippie revolution or whatever it was. There's this thing called the 27 Club of like musicians who have died at like age 27, like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain killed himself, right? And then like, you know, the sort of rock star, like two of the best drummers, John Bonham and Keith Moon, like both drank themselves to death, like choked on their own vomit or something like that. Or I think maybe in some past class, someone talked about like smoking cigarettes as like a rejection of the instrumentation or rational instrumentation of like the body and health. And I'm wondering, no, it seems like the telos of that is more like an individualistic, like sort of experience, like having good experiences, or like very intense extreme experiences as preferable to sort of trying to live a long instrumented life. I'm wondering what the connection to the categories you mentioned, Samuel, is for that kind of ideology.
Yeah, and I don't know, some people call those sorts of, you know, 27 Club, they call it maybe nihilism or hedonism or something like this, but it's strange, because if you look at things from a utilitarian perspective, of course we want people, you know, to extend their life expectancy. We want people to live to 80, 90, 100 years old, but in a I can't tell whether I'd rather have a fulfilling and crazy life and die in a couple of years when I turn 27, or whether I'd live a really dull life and get to about 80. And that's so outside of any sort of logic, but there's something there that speaks to me.
So there's something going on here where the truly creative artist who goes mad archetype is seemingly perhaps somewhat structurally akin to the kamikaze pilot or the Islamic terrorist, in so far as what they share is a kind of drive toward a exit from the kind of mainstream standardized in framing of practical modern Western civilization, essentially. It's like this is what is both intriguing and attractive about the artist, you know, the genius who basically refuses to work a job, right? Refuses to calculate, refuses to worry about their finances, refuses essentially instrumental rationality in favor of optimizing or maximizing truly unconstrained creative expression. That's very sexy. It's very powerful. It's very, you know, and it often provides us with extraordinary, brilliant fruits of labor. You know, we love our artists who give their life to the craft in this radically exiting kind of way. and yet it does often, it seems highly correlated with disaster and destruction of various kinds, both of the self and often of people around them. And yeah, so there's something going on here, right? There's a question, I think, of, to me, the big question I'd love to hear people's takes on is there a way to understand these dynamics, dynamics of liberation, of exit from instrumentally rational control? Is there a way to understand that mechanism and that process of exit or line of flight, or however you want to describe it in whatever register? Is there a way of understanding that mechanism in a way that's perhaps superior to the way that it's understood historically, in such a way that it would give us the code or the key to being able to pursue those lines of flight without the destructive failures, whether that be violence towards others, as in the case of someone like Ted Kaczynski, or in the case of the Islamic terrorist, or just sheer self-destruction, as in the case of so many artists. So to me, that's the kind of really big, that's the $1 million question here, at least from the Deleuzean perspective. Johannes would probably, state a different $1 million question from the Heideggerian perspective, is how do you model and channel and pursue that creative line of flight of exit and escape from instrumental rationality without going, without self-destructing? And that's one way to understand Deleuze and Guattari's extraordinary and often, quite elaborate and, abstract explorations. I think that is essentially what they're trying to do. So I'd love to hear if people have, kind of considered statements on that question. In a way, I think a few of you were kind of brushing up against that question. So I would love to hear it restated, perhaps, if anyone wants to. So that's enough for me. I'd love to hear from Jennifer Harmon, who has her hand up. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, yeah. So I want to sort of tie in something from the class and then answer your question a little bit from my perspective. So I think I'm quoting Johannes here from my notes when he says that the apparent senselessness of our epic arises because we do not yet see the old sense, the old meaning which is inherent in techniques. What has become apparent about techniques through this course? That's my question after listening to all of you today and your ideas. So some of the things that were addressed included de-instrumentalized goals. I'm not going to expand on that because everybody did a pretty good job with their thoughts on that already. Love. The only thing I would add to that would be, can we bring human essence into techniques? Is that a possibility of the expression of love? In my experience, I would say yes, it is. And then as a Mormon, I'm just going to answer what I think Justin was just getting at. So when we have things like madness, terrorism, unconstrained creation that leads to destruction, I'm going to go with what the Mormon prophet this year, 2021, is suggesting for members of the church, which is to be grateful. So I feel like in all of those instances that were mentioned, being grateful is missing. And I think in the modern secular world, we don't have these reminders of what's important spiritually. Looks like Johannes wants to say something. So that was actually all I had to say.
Very good. Very good that you raised gratitude. And I should stress this, that Heidegger makes an explicit connection between denken and danken in German, so between thinking and thanking, which are phonetically close, but he shows also are etymologically connected in the term. And thinking, for Heidegger, this is why death is so important, arises from out of a gratitude for ancestry and everyone who came before us. And this is one way of thinking also about this, the old sense and the trajectories that we're on. So gratitude is very important. I'm very glad you raised this. Thank you.
Excellent. Jesse?
Yeah. To answer, I guess to attempt to answer Justin's question, I was trying to get a video, a vlog done this week that was going to be, if not my presentation, something I could send to everybody. That was on the Black Mirror episode, 15 million merits that has come up multiple times. I think Johannes has a video about that as well. And that was going to be kind of my kind of dark and nihilistic black pill take on a lot of Deleuzian ideas in terms of deterritorialization and reterritorialization. And I had an idea for a follow-up video, which is actually the more kind of positive line of flight, affirmative, positive tasks that Deleuze and maybe to some extent Heidegger present. And to talk about those ideas, I was actually planning on using the film Fight Club. And I feel like the first rule of being an intellectual is you don't talk about Fight Club, because I've been waxing poetic about that movie since I was a 17-year-old. But I do think there is, you could almost, if you watch the movie closely, I think there's a lot of valence there between the ideas that we were exploring with Deleuze. And it's not necessarily foregrounded. It's a lot of stuff that's in the background of the movie. I think that even the title Fight Club itself is almost sort of a pseudonym for Nomad War Machine. But obviously what people remember about the movie and what they think about the movie, when they think of it, they think about just kind of the violence and the brutality and these men beating the shit out of one another in a barroom basements. But there are these sort of moments of escape. Once Project Mayhem starts up and they just kind of become this agrarian commune, or when they're in the car and they're driving off the freeway and Tyler Durden asks the people in the back, what did you want to do with your life? And the passengers say, paint a self-portrait, build a house. And really the love story between Marla Singer and Tyler Durden, which it culminates in. The movie really kind of culminates in them finally, eventually kind of connecting as man and woman, and you get a sense that they're going to have kind of a mortal relationship and a life together. I think that, yeah, and I've talked too much, but if there's any kind of piece of art that I think attempts to answer your question, Justin, and I hope to do a video about it. It's going to be Fight Club and the Nomad War Machine. Either that or the first rule of being an intellectual is you don't talk about Fight Club. But I'd invite everybody to view that movie again, or if other people have thoughts about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can definitely see what you're saying. I don't think that's outlandish. I think the Fight Club is this kind of small scale collective internal affect engineering game, essentially. And so it is somewhat Deleuzian. Especially the most famous lines from that movie, first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. There's a certain theme of imperceptibility there of
he becomes imperceptible even to himself.
Right. But the basic idea being that, to engineer collective liberation requires intrinsically small scale affective engineering, basically. And it really doesn't matter how it's perceived. What matters is the attunement of sensibilities within the assemblage, if you will. And so I think there's a perfectly plausible kind of Deleuzian reading of Fight Club. So I like it. It's interesting. Who else? I'll wait for hands to go up. So I want to kind of ask a question about, and welcome Daniel, by the way. Daniel had some technical issues that were outside of his control, so he's joining us late, but that's perfectly fine. Daniel, in just a minute, I'll give you an opportunity to share with us what you were hoping to share originally. We're now in kind of the collective discussion session, but you'll have an opportunity to talk for sure in a minute. So yeah, I feel like this is a promising thread. I think there are people who I'd maybe like to hear a little bit more from Hans about love. I think that was kind of what I took as the main theme, or one of the main themes of your talk, Hans. And I'd also like to hear more from Nathan on these questions on this larger question we're talking about at the moment about, we feel like we have some examples of what the line of flight looks like, and yet they often seem highly doomed. Perhaps, is it intrinsically doomed, or are there clever insights we've extracted through the readings or from our collective thinking over the past few weeks that, what can we say about that? And so I wonder, for Hans, I'm kind of wondering if love is perhaps a crucial category in this respect. I mean, Deleuze and Guattari wrote a lot about love. Actually, if you search the Capitalism and Schizophrenia texts, the word love comes up a lot, and there are some lines where they say it really is all about love. I believe that's a quotation at one point. So there's definitely something there that I think is important, and I wonder if you could say a little bit more, Hans, about how love represents a kind of line of flight, perhaps, and Nathan, I was very interested in what you were saying about AI and destiny and fate. I wonder if, sometimes I wonder if the lines of flight we observe in our history and our culture that end in destruction, I wonder if sometimes there is a disregard for, sometimes it seems as if people are trying to run away from fate or something like that. When you look at, genius artists who die when they're 27 because they're partying too much. I mean, it's hard to resist a possible inference that, there's this kind of crazed rush to somehow escape the inevitable fate that is getting older and entering other phases of life, or perhaps, the Islamic terrorist who decides to kill a bunch of people in a kind of protest against the world. Is that a kind of resentment against the intrinsic limitations of earthly life? So yeah, I just wonder, can AI or can increasingly machinic intelligences, whether that be, robots or maybe Bitcoin or various forms of contemporary intelligence instantiation, can this teach us something new that maybe Deleuze didn't fully understand, that would maybe significantly, or Heidegger didn't fully understand, just because of the chronology of these technological innovations? What can AI really teach us maybe about the Deleuzean perspective or the Heideggerian perspective that might really add something fundamentally new and revealing? So yeah, I'd love to hear more from Hans or Nathan on specifically on those questions. But in the meantime, while you're getting your thoughts together, I'd love to hear Molly next. Go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say about these kind of like reactionary or rejecting examples that we give, I think they're really interesting because like if you look at the history of like the philosophy like of Islamic terrorism, like the ideology of it is very, very like anti-Western, anti-capitalism. Like I can't remember the name of the original philosopher, but he basically went to the US and he's writing about this kind of hedonism and this kind of meaninglessness and this nihilism. And it's not too dissimilar to the kind of like ideas that we've been throwing around in terms of like a sense of lack. And then that's, I'm just raising that as a point. I'll go on to it later. I'm not saying that any of that stuff is justified or similar in a profound sense to what we're talking about. But I just think it's important for the point I'm trying to make. So that's the first point. The second point was about, I think it was Kevin when he was talking about the artists, and he was also talking about the hippie movement. And I think the hippie movement is interesting as well, because it's also sort of rejection of kind of what's happening in this, in a certain sense in Western society, but also it's a completely nihilistic rejection. It's kind of like this falling apart, like this absolute, like the hippie movement just disintegrated, fell apart at the center with like children taking drugs and stuff like that. So I think what's interesting about both these, and this is what the point I'm trying to get at, is they're both trying to reject something, but as we've already discussed and realized, they don't really manage to reject it. They kind of fall apart in their own rejection. So I wonder if in that sense, and they're both like in a certain sense also nihilistic in this kind of antagonism, you know, like especially the hippie movement, like it's very like, if you look at it, especially in its later stages, it's very much a nihilistic falling apart symptom of Western culture. So I guess what the point I'm trying to make is two things. One thing, to go back to sort of my presentation, maybe the problem is this kind of like sort of hooking yourself up like an umbilical cord to like what you're rejecting, and at the same time striving against it. Like maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe there needs to be some sort of dynamic interplay of opposites or understanding of them. That was the first point. So as opposed to like an abject rejection. The second point I wanted to make was that also it also makes me wonder about the possibilities, the real possibilities of a beyond from within the situation that we're in, because both these examples we give are sort of rejections, but they don't really get past what they're trying to reject. And I think it's to do with like a lot of what we talked about in terms of fate and stuff like that. I think it's to do with this like very well-known idea of the death of God. If it's something that we're trying to create, if it's something that we're trying to say, okay, I'm opposed to this and this is me willing, I'm opposed to it, you're still very much within that representational framework. So like arguably it's slightly different for the Islamics, but so I think there needs to be something harnessed, something received, which is in a real sense beyond, like which is like in a real sense spiritual or divine. And that brings me to the final thing, which is I think in terms of love and mind and that sort of thing, I think the answer is very simple, really. Like, I think the thing is just like, in terms of how like ancient peoples understood how they would navigate the world, it's like you're navigated by the heart, and the mind just aids you in sort of coming to solutions like at particular times, like putting things in boxes when you need to. But it's like your dreams and your heart and your spirituality and your soul that ultimately guides you. So we have it the reverse way around at the moment. We've sort of ripped out the heart, and it's just this putting things into neat little categories and striving to, and it has this devoidness. But I also think it's not something that you can simply place back in. I think that there's that what we've hinted at, and like what's come across with these two examples that people have given is genuine examples of lines of flight, which are completely destructive and crazy. Like, I think that shows us that we're in a real predicament here, where an actual sense of an outlet or a sense of a sort of beyond has very much dissipated. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you. Johannes, sure.
Just briefly, one thing I often say, and I've said often also on Justin's channel a couple of times when we started the course the first time, and then again we opened it again for the second time. One of the things perhaps we can learn from Heidegger is to withdraw from the dialectic. Speaking of escape, I'll leave it at that. Just think about this. What's the dialectic? Is it external? Is it immanent? Even if it is immanent, are there still ways of moving out of an antithetical stance to what is and then move on? Another beautiful quote, because we've heard the word destruction quite often now, is from Ezra Pound: to be men, not destroyers. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thanks, Johannes. I mean, maybe briefly before we go to, I want to hear from Taylor. Something I'll add to that also very briefly from the Deleuzean perspective is that, Deleuze believes that immanence is itself transcendental. And that's a bit paradoxical because these are generally kind of opposite categories in some regard. So to say that immanence is transcendental, in other words, is basically what Deleuze, one of the messages I think Deleuze is really trying to get across to us is that escape from the dialectic that Johannes just mentioned is, in some sense, it's always already happening. It's always available to us. It's a matter of being able to see its kind of immediate radical accessibility. The instrumental rationality is what makes us constantly trapped in these kind of false transcendentals or these false transcendents. Whereas the only thing that's truly transcendental is the fact that when one starts to think, one is always starting from scratch in some way. There is a kind of pure, this is what the plane of immanence is. The plane of immanence is, the whole idea of the plane of immanence in Deleuze and Guattari is that anytime you start to do anything, if you start to think a thought, you wake up in the morning and you look out the window and you're reflecting on the day. When you create a new work of art, if you start writing a book, if you start writing a blog post, when you start articulating a new thought in a conversation, you're always, if you really drill down into what's going on, you're always creating this radical break. You're instituting a new canvas that is itself immanence. To think anything, you are actually pre-populating a whole world. You're kind of creating this new world, and you need to do that essentially to be able to articulate a new thought, to articulate a new philosophy or a blog post or a book or whatever the case might be. One is always transcendentally restarting from immanence. But we forget that, or we lose sight of that, or we lose connection with that, because in our minds, I'm thinking, okay, I need to write this. I want to write a blog post. I'm going to try to, impress this person. I want to get my follower count up, right? It's like, those are the false transcendents. Whereas in fact, to write a blog post, one is actually, in a radical sense, starting from absolutely nothing, but bootstrapping from nothing, a whole plane of possibilities, and that's imminent. That's imminence, which is transcendental. There's no escaping that. One is always starting from this radical new ground of freedom. And I think one of the things Deleuze is really trying to help us see is that that's always you're already doing that anyway. The point is just to be able to access this transcendental phenomenon and more consciously, and to own it, and to therefore be able to make the most out of it is one way to possibly understand that. So Taylor, please.
I'll continue with the theme of exit. You know, Justin, you brought up Bitcoin and its potential. I spent some time thinking about this with regard to markets, but I didn't want to digress too much from, I think, the core of what I was trying to say. But anyway, what I keep coming back to is there is no technological exit. You know, at best, there's a pushing of the boundary. And I think it's helpful to think of this in terms of axiomatics. I'll cross signals to Deleuze for a second. You know, I think crypto, it has this incredible liberatory potential. Don't mistake this as some dominant criticism of it. But at least presently, it appears to be more and more of a hedge against, the systemic risks of a dominant financial system. Like it pairs nicely. And we see institutional investors slowly moving into Bitcoin. So what I was getting at is there isn't this, there's not some technological solution that, puts us over the edge. At best, I think the way out is through the center. Hence my focus on embracing, the risk and volatility that we're attempting to obfuscate.
Yeah, that's a nice additional touch. Thanks for that, Taylor. I agree with what you're saying. I think that, if you use the financial system as an example of a kind of technological inframing with kind of extreme constraints that are generally seen as oppressive, the exit or the line of flight from the financial system is not some kind of like rural utopia with no money, right? It's something like Bitcoin, which is essentially accelerating the financial system into something that is suddenly radically different and is now actually a kind of mortal threat to the prevailing regime. Something like that. You're muted, Taylor.
I think my point was really that they kind of pair nicely.
Okay.
Bitcoin, it allows to sort of hedge against this dominant market, not to replace it.
I see.
Which is why we see institutional investors, moving, some of their assets into Bitcoin.
I see.
So
okay.
I think it's not, perhaps there's some great future potential, somewhere down the line, it shoots us into the beyond. But right now, I think it actually, by way of axiomatics, like it allows the boundary of the current system to just expand further, perhaps to take on more risk. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a perfectly understandable, defensible perspective. Maybe I was saying it different, which is fine. So Pablo makes a comment in the chat. Maybe Pablo would like to speak up in a minute and articulate that. But in the meantime, so I see hands up from Nathan and Hans, so I'd love to hear from them. Before that, I think now would be a natural place to invite Daniel to say a few words. Daniel had to join us late, but Daniel has an interesting hypothesis about saying yes to technology, and I think that might be a nice fit at this stage in the group conversation. So Daniel, please feel free to hold forth for a few minutes. So I'd love to hear what your kind of final thoughts are on the seminar series. Go ahead.
Okay, so hi everyone. Sorry I'm late, but well, I actually wrote a small text, just one-page text, which won't take more than 5 minutes, I think. So to stick to the schedule, I'll just read it. Let me just put you guys to the side. Okay, so the title is Saying Yes to Technology, a Heideggerian Perspective. Can you guys hear me? Okay, yeah? Okay, so from the massive production found in the food industry and the always operating systems of nuclear energy to the handheld smartphones and virtual reality, it is clear that modern technology, understood as a progressive advancement of society, for now, holds an impressive power of societal configuration. However, such impressiveness conceals, or at least seems to conceal, the consequences of an inattentive relation to technology itself, or an inattentive relationship to what Heidegger calls the very realm, vision, opened by technology. So here I translated vision as realm following Johannes' idea. So my main point in this talk is just to elucidate the positive possibility of an attentive relation to technology, differentiating between what could be called the everydayness comprehension of technology and Heidegger's own interpretation of it. Okay, so although we cannot neglect the influence of technology understood in the everydayness sense, that is, as a progressive advancement of society, something like that, Heidegger's approach actually goes much deeper and argues for a definition of technology as a way of revealing. In other words, technology as Gestell, or inframing or positionality, usually translated as inframing or positionality, is in fact the way being presents itself to us in our epoch. Therefore, as human beings do not possess neither control how being appears, right? We can't simply decide not to be affected by it. That is, it is impossible to say no to Gestell. However, as we will see just a little bit further, this is only the submissive or passive no. As Gestell continues to freely operate, every unconcealed being is present as a standing reserve or Bestand, and not as a being in its own being. Okay, so for this reason, Heidegger calls for a careful response to technology through what he calls meditative thinking. This manner of thinking can open up a new possible and proper answer to the threat of technology. In more practical terms, we must actively say no to technology when we understand it as Gestell. So an active no and not a passive no. But at the same time, we say yes to technology when we understand it as an opening to being. It is in the very core of technology that lies the relation humans or mortals have to being. So a manifestation of a special connection, let's call it, we might say, to Sein itself. That is a connection to that massive force which allows for the manifestability of every being. Consequently, our attentive relation must be based on the simultaneous yes and no, touching on what Johannes was saying about not the dialectical yes and no. So it must be based on the simultaneous yes and no. We say yes to technological tools, but no to how they are presented to us. We say yes to being, but no to positionality as the only occurrence possible of being. Nevertheless, our yes and no, like one thing, right? Yes and no, is not a confrontation. It is also not a submission. It is in fact an expression of our freedom. In the text, and here to finish my text, in the text entitled Memorial Address, Heidegger states, I would call this comportment toward technology, which expresses yes and at the same time no, by an old word, releasement toward things, or in German, die Gelassenheit zu den Dingen. In a word, Gelassenheit, a letting go. That's it, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. Very thoughtful, prepared remarks. Appreciate the thought you put into that. And yeah, very on point actually for this moment in the group discussion. So that's rather serendipitous. So, okay, I want to maybe circle back and ask a follow-up question to Daniel. I really liked where he was going with that. But I also want to hear from Nathan and Hans, who we were recently talking with about some questions. So Hans, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you asked about love, and I guess the thing that I think about with that is, I looked up the Heideggerian thing, and I looked up the etymology of love. And I don't remember it verbatim, but it comes from the Proto-Indo-European, I think it's a root, and it's like lube or lub or something like that, but it means to care. And I think that's kind of where, because love can kind of like seem like oh, like a romantic love or something like that. And you can get caught up in that and then start to think, oh, well, like certain things aren't love, blah, blah, blah. But I think, and this kind of goes to what Molly was saying about like what kind of you feel in your heart. And I think those things that you feel in your heart are things you care about. And I think it's in a way, it's very simple where, okay, these are the things I care about and they concern me. And things you care about and are concerned with, you have to kind of look after. And I guess the person, I guess maybe I was speaking to and what I wrote was, he's a man that's 21, so he's 5 years younger than me. And he just started this job. And when he spoke to me about, work, I'm just, here to work and I'll live later. It seemed it was, and we were up in an attic, so I couldn't like talk to the guy about it at all. It's like grunting, and I was just like, yeah, sure, yeah, work to work, and like putting in a 2x4. But to me, that is like a moment of fear. And the thing that's very interesting about that is that we started talking about cooking, and I became very excited about talking about cooking. I just made some like ramen from scratch, and I got really into it. And after the same guy, after saying the work, work now, live later thing, he immediately looked up to me. He looked up at me and was like, what are you doing working construction? And I was like, it seemed really weird because I was just like, dude, work now, live later kind of thing. But it made me think like, oh, this is kind of like, this is something that maybe you don't fully care about. Like it's maybe this is just some like a put on and a way to kind of contort yourself or conform to like this work, like all these guys like nailing shit and doing all that. And yeah, I think, and I think I see the path on that trajectory. It leads to a lot of the people in the field I'm in to fall out with a care or concern with things that are truly in their hearts. And so then they just get into this mindset of that I will live my life later on. Now I will work. And what follows with that, I think, is well, I think I said something about anemic substitutions, but like there's a certain amount of things that distract or comfort somebody who's in that state. And I think I'm done there, but that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's interesting. You make me kind of wonder if this idea of Gelassenheit from Heidegger or releasement, which Daniel elegantly put onto the table, is, I think it has some applications possibly in what you're talking about in the kind of the workaday life, right? Because what is the difference between a worker who is living freely, who is truly living life fully as a worker versus a alienated and resentful worker who experiences work as suffering? What is the difference if not a kind of releasement into the things themselves and a kind of caring attitude, right? Because if you're, if you're hammering a 2x4, day in and day out, sure, on some level that it's easy to experience that as drudgery and to hate it. But if you really care about hammering that 2x4 well and adequately, and you're really caring about building the best possible house that you're building, 1 2x4 at a time, doesn't work transform? Doesn't the nature of the work transform? Doesn't the phenomenological experience of the work transform? And is that not a viable path to a truly full and meaningful free life? Is a kind of caring submission to one's fate, right? A kind of embracing, sure, okay, this is drudgery, but it's my drudgery, and I'm going to really invest myself fully. I'm going to truly release myself into the work, and in that way, find my freedom through a kind of conscious submission to one's fate, to really love one's fate. It is not a caring for the objects at hand, a caring for the work at hand. Is that possibly a key to this kind of life of freedom that is paradoxically a life of submission at the same time. So that's what you're making me kind of think. I wonder if...
Yeah, I would agree. And I felt that actually that same day. It was really interesting. I mean, we were up in this little tiny crawl space. I was like breaking my back, and there's all this rat shit. But I at the end of like the day, I felt pretty good. I had a lot of energy. And I think with that, if you go into it with that mindset, a lot of things kind of become more open, and you kind of see, like an escape, like, okay, maybe I don't have to do this for the rest of my life. Like I will put in my best effort now, and I won't get caught in desiring, kind of weak substitutes that kind of, I mean, a lot of like a $100,000 truck that you don't need. Sorry, that's just yeah.
Excellent. Nathan, please.
Okay. Yes, Justin, you asked about disregarding of one's fate and or ignoring it or running away from it. You said a crazed rush. I think you asked me if the lines of flight could be that, or seem to me to be just that, or no more than that. They certainly can be, although I wouldn't extend that and say that's the case for anything that you could propose. The idea of being in a crazed rush away from one's fate it got me to thinking of that the opposite, like a crazed rush towards one's fate. And if that might not be a more appropriate description of what a lot of people like Kaczynski or Islamic extremists might be doing. They are seeking their own destruction. Or Kaczynski perhaps not, but the Islamic terrorists, suicide bombers, certainly, extremists in general. Which does raise the question of how do you kill someone who wants to die? The UK strategy is don't kill him, do something else with him. It's called prevent. The specific thing for like identifying these guys, these extremists, right-wing, Islamic, whatever, is called channel. Channel what? Well, channel the people, obviously, into a better way of being, but more fundamentally, channel their desires. Channel their kind of flows in the Deleuzean sense. It's an explicitly liberal or neoliberal strategy. You don't kill them. Instead, you make them basically chill out, relax. That I think actually has a good chance of working on all of these guys. It's certainly not the only strategy, but I wouldn't put it past the society we have to control people in that way. I mean, in the end, they are resentful based on a reaction to the current society. So if the current society satisfies the desires that it itself ultimately is implanted into them, then that could work. But that's certainly not a line of flight. A positive line of flight, or a line of flight that isn't simply a rushing towards death, or a rushing away from death. My own view is that it has to be sensitive to destiny or fate as it is, as it shows itself to us. So when I said that it seems to be our destiny to create artificial intelligences, I didn't meditate on that, or like God didn't tell me that we're going to make AIs. That's a deduction that I arrived at by thinking like a scientist. It's based on observing the universe as it is, to me, or in other words, destiny as I see it. As it shows itself to me. What I've gotten from like these weeks together is an understanding, perhaps, of destiny as something that we are in the realm of. So if we're in the realm of destiny and we want to get away from, to escape the uncanny or the bad aspects of our existence, then I think it does have ultimately to be in accordance with with destiny as it is for us. It's not, and rather than trying to abnegate our responsibilities to the world that have been like placed in our care. That I think is the extra element that's missing from the more explicitly reactionary responses to modernity. I mean like paleo-reactionary, a sort of reaction that attempts just to undo the present and to avoid the future by turning around and heading in the opposite direction. It has to respond to material conditions as they are, because material conditions are what are being disclosed to us right now. It's not that materiality is simply like how it's always been. It's that this is something else is being given to us. Something else is being disclosed to us by the world that we have to respond to.
All right, excellent. I feel like we're making quite a bit of progress actually on this question of, the authentic line of flight that does not end badly, and the authentic releasement that is the promised path forward relative to or versus these kind of false enticements or these faux lines of flight that only end in destruction. Nathan is making some interesting distinctions here, I think, which are promising. And, in Daniel's talk also just a few minutes ago, there's this kind of distinction between the active yes and the passive yes, and the active no and the passive no. I like that. And I think, so I think everyone in their own ways is making some progress and in seeing, and, in Hans's fascinating, real world examples of the workaday life. It's, I sense that a few of you are making some advancements on this very vexing puzzle. So just wanted to flag that and applaud that. People need to continue these lines of research for sure. I mean, obviously these are eternal questions, and I should note, by the way, we should start moving towards wrapping it up. So I'll just kind of encourage people to, if anyone has any kind of particularly pointed kind of final thoughts, please don't be shy. But let's maybe move towards some more kind of concluding statements or kind of final positions before we wrap this up today. I'd love to hear from Pablo, who's been waiting. Go ahead, Pablo.
Hey guys, I think on that point that there's no exit with technology. I think that is I think it's short-sighted, and that I think actually the only exit is through technology. Actually,
through technology. You're saying?
Yeah, with or through with. Yeah.
I feel like that's becoming a consensus almost so far. So who are you positioning your comment against? Just to be clear, Jesse.
Yeah, Taylor.
Oh, Taylor.
That said that there's no exit through technology, and
okay, go on. Sorry.
I agree with Nathan on that point of trying to get to, in a scientific way, to truths. And maybe it's just me that I've been reading too much David Deutsch, but I think the answer really comes down to trying to find solid explanations to the reality that we live in. Either that is physical reality or the social interactions of how we behave. And I think on that point on Bitcoin, it sort of gets you thinking about what is money, how we communicate value, what is trust, what is authority, and what is consensus, and what is a centralized system and a decentralized system. And all those questions start to pop out, and we start to learn about reality as it is. And I think the only thing that allows us to make those questions is technology. When we didn't have telescopes, we would tell stories about the stars. Now we know more about the stars, and in also in very subtle ways, and that maybe they're not fully like tangible evidence, but we can see that like light bends with gravity because we saw a dot on the screen instead of here when we try to read that, and maybe it's not absolutely obvious through our human eyes, through our naked eyes, but it is through technology. And it seems like I have this sort of Spinozan God view that we try to understand the world, and the more we understand it, the less we know we understand it, and it's just this immense positive some kind of game we're in and trying to understand it more. And the only, like, it seems like it's usually the case that the incumbents in the status quo gets sedimented in what they think is true, and the reality is that it's always changing. And because they are slow to make those changes, they have a lot of things that are like factually wrong and incorrect, that do not match with reality. And the advantage that individuals have, and that's what is amazing about the internet, it's that allows us to go faster. And like the only way for individuals to get out ahead is to go faster. And when you say that, well, there's this institutions that are getting into Bitcoin, like underneath what you're saying is that they beat me to it. and I think like the solution for individuals is to go faster. And that's like, in a way, like factually, like that's what startups understand fundamentally. Like if you're trying to fight the big whale, like you have to move faster. That's the only way.
Interesting. It reminds me of what Nathan was saying before about, how do we rush forward into our fate instead of, rushing away from it or running away from it. So these themes of speed are interesting to me for sure. Taylor, did you want to, since that was somewhat directed to you, did you want to reply? You don't have to, but maybe you could. Yeah.
I mean, perhaps my view is short-sighted. I really do think, cryptocurrency is an incredible tool and has even more incredible potential. The caveat I want to throw in is I'm more speaking to how it's being used. It's not that an institution piled in before me. It's that, a large institutional investor, it may be piling into Bitcoin to hedge against a bunch of investments that are, denominated in US dollars, or incumbent on a financial market that, is loaded with all kinds of systemic risks, related to COVID or deflationary dollars or, whatever it is. So yes, very well then, it may be a short-sighted view. My point was just to say that, if we look at how this technology is being used right now, it almost further perpetuates, I think, the amount of risk that can be piled onto the dominant financial market.
Okay, I appreciate that, Kevin. And then you're just reminding everyone, if you want to squeeze in a final thought, you're welcome to. But otherwise, we're gonna move towards wrapping this up. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, some things Pablo said made me think of. So he was saying something about, oh, we know more about the universe now. We have telescopes. We have whatever. And I was wondering what Heidegger would say about that. He's not a Luddite, right? But it's like we have to be careful about learning more about the universe and understanding these internal, like the details of the mechanics, like can do, right? And so I thought of Richard Feynman, and his response to Heidegger might be, so I'm not sure if this is Heideggerian exactly, but Richard Feynman like has a series of interviews where someone asks him a question where it's like, oh, like if you know all about the details of how the flower works, like doesn't it take away from the beauty of it? Or like how electricity or something works? And then Feynman was such an interesting character. He was able to explain things and like bring that poetic beauty to science and understanding the universe. But I think the really interesting contrast is what is one of Feynman's like big accomplishments? What is one of the big things he was a part of was the Manhattan Project, and like figuring out how to build these big weapons of mass destruction, the nuclear weapons, right? And I think that's like understanding, like unlocking the power of inside of an atom. That's I think what Heidegger would characterize as a challenging force of trying to unlock the powers from nature. So I think, yes, we can achieve some more truth and beauty by understanding the mechanics or the exact physical, chemical, whatever laws of the universe. But I think an interesting quick contrast to Feynman would be, so one of my favorite books ever is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. And he sort of provides a contrast of the scientists who invent this thing called Ice 9, which is sort of like a stand-in for nuclear technology. And you contrast this with a society living on like a culture living on a little island. It's a really interesting sort of contrast of sort of, for lack of better words, like religion versus science, just as a broad brush. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kevin. My instinct is to just artificially and, out of, for no particularly good reason, kind of just draw the line here and say, these are eternal questions, which we'll be thinking about and writing about for a very long time. So I could talk to you all day about all this stuff, and many of our seminar sessions did go long because, there's just so much to say, and there's so many promising threads here. But I think one has to end things at a certain point, and it now feels like as good a time as any, since I don't see any more hands up. So I would like to, of course, say a few parting words before we let you all go. But I was thinking Johannes might also. I feel like I've been talking more than him. So Johannes, would you like to now?
Well, just thanks to everyone. Really magnificent talks. I'd encourage all of you to continue to write in whichever way you see fit, or to make videos, whatever it is, and continue on your projects. I think they're all very worthwhile to follow through, and I'm very intrigued by the eclecticism. We've heard about financial markets, but also a question of love and etc. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you all very much for this experience with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. I would second all of that. And the only thing I would add before letting you all go, in addition to what Johannes was saying, first of all, obviously, thank you very much for your contributions throughout the past 8 weeks, and especially for everyone's quite thoughtful remarks today. Some prepared, some not prepared, but all of them were thoughtful, and prepared is not necessarily better, but I'm just saying everyone in your own way put a lot of care and thought into your contributions today. So I'm very impressed and very grateful for everyone's hard work over the past several weeks, and especially for today's presentations, which were very, very chock full of a lot of interesting and promising threads. And kind of to piggyback on what Johannes was saying, this is just the beginning. A kind of serious 8-week study of Deleuze and Heidegger and these questions of technology. It's just the beginning. The whole point of this 8-week intensive was really just to get you all up and running, hopefully, and in whatever ways Johannes and I could do that, to give you some initial coordinates, to give you some initial questions, and to hopefully get the ball rolling on questions that philosophers have been dealing with for ages and will continue to deal with for ages. And in today's conversation and in all of your efforts to kind of boil down what for you and your experience over the past 8 weeks was the most important kind of themes or ideas, and to phrase that and articulate that today in your own words, you should really just think of each of your presentations today as a kind of flag in the ground for future developments, for avenues for future research. It's really just the beginning. And I just heard so many interesting, promising threads, little turns of phrases where I thought to myself, oh, that's a beautiful phrase. That could be a book title, or, oh, that's a fascinating question. I would love to hear someone really try to answer that question at length, over the course of 8,000 word article. There are just so many possibilities and so many promising threads in today's final capstone seminar. And the goal in a seminar such as this is never ever to cover all of the questions or to satisfyingly answer all of the questions. It's really only ever to generate avenues for future research. And the real work, the real accomplishments when it comes to philosophy or intellectual history more generally, the real work is always done over long periods of time, privately, quietly. And maybe some of you want to pursue that, maybe some of you don't, and that's completely fine. But I just want to basically say very, very emphatically that everyone who spoke today, everyone who's been participating in these seminars, I've heard all of you say at least one or two things where I thought to myself, that really deserves further development and could be extremely rewarding and potentially, meaningful, novel contributions to how we think, So I just want to basically make that super clear and encourage you all very strongly to please, continue reading about these questions, continue thinking about these questions. And most importantly, as I always try to stress in these courses is, continue thinking and writing, continue creating, continue producing, because that's where the real progress is made. And I think you're all more than capable, as evidenced today. So once again, I just want to thank you all. This has been an absolute pleasure over the past 8 weeks. And this is a very satisfying culmination of it all. So big thanks to all of you who have made this what it was. All right. What I will do is now turn off the video.